Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the Governing Board Workshop, Friday, May 13th. It is a workshop, and we have, first thing of order, we will rise, if you're able to, and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we do have a quorum. We have 3 of our governing board members who are on remotely. We have Ann and Jim and Donna who are on the phone with us. So we'll hear from them if they have questions. Okay, the first item of business is approval of the minutes. Are there any changes, corrections? Anything from the remote category? Are we okay with the minutes? Okay, hearing and seeing no concerns, we will adopt them as presented. Okay, the first item of business is the final budget review. We've had approval of the capital projects at our last meeting, and now we're going to have questions and a little presentation on the operating budget of the for us. And Cliff, I believe, is going to do the presentation.
Thank you, Sue. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, board. All right. Where's that clicker? Oh. Okay, we're coming down the home stretch here. Just want to give a quick update on the operating budget. We've basically had, I would say, 11 touch point engagements over the last 4 months, starting on January 12th with Sports Pavilion, and culmination up to today at the workshop. So we've had some great feedback from community members, committee members. All has helped develop and shape this budget, and also helped educate the community and get their feedback. So, you know, this is kind of where we're at in the process, and just want to give another update here. No changes other than added some slides to talk about membership dues a little bit in terms of historical dues trends, and just to kind of further educate and give some context to what we're doing in this fiscal year budget. So again, want to reiterate our goals, because I think this is important. This is the baseline to how we budget, how we put our budget together, and we keep this as kind of the foundation to what our thought process is. And, you know, primarily, again, preserve and protect, maintain, and enhance the assets of the association. Meet or exceed the minimum reserve funding requirement established by the governing board. Also, this budget continues to meet the goal of investing in new capital projects, and we'll talk a little bit about that later with Michelle in terms of master planning. That's all part of it. And then, as well as this budget strives to maintain the standards through the existing financial policies. So, you know, we have a product here at the Rec Centers of Sun City West. We think it's a great product. We think that we are a top-notch community, and our members think that. That's the feedback we get back from them, and we want to keep that standard of excellence. And this budget, we feel, does this. Quick overview of the financial. Again, $1.4 million inflow to our operating margin into our reserve fund. Off to the right, those specific areas that are impacted most in this budgeting process. Okay, let's talk about the dues. So this visual here gives a a trend of what our fee dollar increases have been for the last 20 plus years. Starting with 2000, 2001, you can see that over time we've had, kind of ebbs and flows to our dues increases. And, I wanted to show this to kind of give you an example or a visual of how those dues increases have been over the last 20 years. And you can see there's a couple of years where we had 0 due increases in 2014 and 15 and 21 and 22. And, our largest dues increase, I believe, was $39 in 2007 and 2008. So I just wanted to give a little perspective into what the dues have been over the last 20 plus years. Now this slide, I laid on top of this dues increase the inflation rate. So you can see this visual shows that as the inflation rate rises and falls, so do our dues increases. So this shows that we kind of follow what's happening in the real world, what's happening with CPI. We kind of follow that. It's kind of like a natural trend. So as inflation goes down, typically the dues go down in terms of the increase year over year. And then this chart shows the inflation rate. So not the inflation dollars, but the inflation rate. And how our inflation rate changes over time and how our dues increase or our dues change rate changes over time. So you can see here that typically our dues increase outpaces our inflation rate. For the last 2 years, inflation rate has outpaced our dues increases. So you can see in 22-23, this is through March of this year, so it was 8.5%, trending at 8.5%. Now it's 8.3%, I believe, through April. Those numbers just came out. But this, this chart shows the dues increase rate along with the inflation rate. Okay, so where are we at in this budget process, and what are our next steps? So we've given all the presentations. Again, all the feedback from the community. It's been a great process. My first time going through this process here at the rec centers. It's been awesome, to be honest. It's just great to be able to communicate and get feedback and go back and re-communicate and get this information out to the community. We've had some great feedback. So the process has been, I feel, very engaging and very appropriate. So the capital budget items over $100,000 were approved at the governing board meeting on April 28th. And then our final budgets will go to the governing board for approval on May 26th. Now I'd like to open it up to the board for any questions or the audience.
Okay, are there questions from our board members? Anything from the people that are remote? Do you have any questions for Cliff? Okay, hearing none. Oh, Sharon.
I have some questions in regards to the very first slide that you showed.
Sure.
Number one was under ancillary, $199,872. Tell me what ancillary is.
Ancillary is the revenue increase you're talking about?
Yep.
So ancillaries is our golf cart revenue, range balls, and cell towers.
Does it have anything to do with the Blizzard Acres or any of the monies that are made there? I'm just trying to figure out what's in the ancillary.
No. Those are all specifically related to range balls, golf carts, and cell towers.
Okay, that's the only thing that's in there.
Correct.
Golf clubs?
Club rentals, sorry.
So specifically golf.
Yes, and cell towers because they're at the golf courses.
Okay. Okay. And question is, does the budget that was projected for 21-22, and then again for 2023, include the 59 employees that we are supposedly trying to hire? It's on the HR report before.
Some of them, yes, not all 59. So prior year, again, some of them, but not all 59. In the budget, so I would say in the budget presentation, there's a slide on FTEs, okay, which is actual hours, actual people, actual payroll. In that slide, it starts in 2013-14 with 295 FTEs.
Okay.
Over time, that increases all the way up to 313 in 2000. I believe it's 2019, 2020. COVID hits, down to 285. This year, up to 287 for this year, and we've budgeted 291. So those are the full-time equivalents. That's an aggregation of all the hours. If you divide that by 40, that gives you the total number of FTEs. That's what this budget is based on, 291 FTEs. Which is 4 more than what it's tracking right now, 6 more than what it was last year, and 22 less than 2019, 2020.
Okay, can you tell me what the figure amount of money is that's in there in regards to the FTEs then? I mean,
what?
Can you tell me what the amount of money is in relationship to what's being projected of those full-time employees, or however you're dividing it out, so that I have some idea about money-wise? What it is we have in the budget that we haven't, that our salaries, I'm assuming it's under salaries. I don't know where you've put it, number one. So
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out where it is. So that would be
So-
part of it, was in benefits as well?
Yes, so to answer your question, I can't give that to you specifically right now. Are you
Okay.
asking about what seats we've budgeted for that we don't have filled?
Yes, in other words, you
Okay.
have on the HR report that we have 59 employees that we want to hire. So my question comes back is, again, I don't know that whether they're full-time, part-time, what amount of hours they have, so I can't judge that piece,
Right.
correct? Okay, so then to that point, when I'm looking at financial statements, I need to know specifically how much money is in this budget for people that we are going to hire. And is that broken down by full-time, part-time?
Yeah, there's 4 FTEs that we currently don't have.
Okay,
Okay, so if you want to take the FTEs and divide it into the total salary, wages, and benefits, and
I'm just
multiply
trying to
that
figure
times
out
4, I can
money.
give it to you. But I don't have it right this second, but
That's
I
fine.
can give it to you.
okay, that would be great, because
Okay.
I need to know that in order to find out what's being charged out to the budget itself. 'Cause
Yeah.
what you're budgeting for versus what we're actually trying to spend, because I know for a fact it took a couple of our other businesses out in the general population over a year to hire 1 employee, let alone 59.
Yeah,
okay?
we're not looking to hire 59
Well,
employees.
but we have them there, so I'm trying to figure out what that is in regards to what amount of money we're actually putting into the budget for that. So if in fact you have 59 different people that you need to hire, how are you going to pay for that? Is it 4 hours per person? Is it 7 hours per I have no idea what the amount is then. I didn't know whether they were full-time or part-time for this budget, okay?
Yes.
Does that make
yeah,
sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
I want to be clear, though. We're certainly not looking to hire 59 people. We have 59 open seats in terms of what we've had in the past over the years that are not filled, okay? But I can go back, but I'm positive that 308 or 313 FTEs does not include those 59 people.
Okay,
Okay, so
that's what I need to
so
know.
yeah, so it's not in there either. But I can give you an idea of what we have open that we've budgeted to fill.
Okay, and then another question is, on the 5%, you already have a 5%, I believe Mr. Finelli said that the budget, the budget and finance, or the budgeting part of the benefits package goes in January, not July. There was already a 5% increase given last year, and so that's staying. So instead of us giving 80% into the budget for benefits, it's now at 85%. So that 5% is already in there. Is that correct? As an increase?
It's in for the second 6 months of this year,
Right.
of this fiscal year, yes.
And it's also then incorporated into the next year?
We've requested that through the budgeting process for next year, yes.
Okay, and is that amount of
continue
money?
that.
Is that amount of money on here somewhere that I know what that amount is?
Yeah, well, it's baked into that salaries, wages, and benefits, but it is also in the divisional. It'll show by division what the increase was.
Okay, so to my understanding, it's around $47,000 last year, so is it around the same amount for this year?
No, that would be 47 for the first 6
6
months,
months?
and then
47 for the second?
47 for the second, plus whatever we budgeted another 15% increase
Okay,
for
so,
the second.
so that's why I'm asking what that figure is. I don't know what those figures are, and I need to know that information.
Okay,
Sorry,
I'll get that to
I
you.
need to know what you're budgeting for. I can't see it in here. I don't know what amount of this overage that you have
Okay,
is in relationship to that part of the benefit package, because you've already been given that 5%. It's now being incorporated in on a yearly basis for this. It's not something that we just gave away for the first 6 months, and now we're having to keep it for the next year. So going forward, it's going to be at 15%. It was at 20%, now it's at 15%. That's already an increase for that's already a benefit for the employees, correct?
that's correct. We started that in January of this year.
Okay, just making sure. And that's all for right now.
Okay, any other
Madam
questions?
President,
Yes,
Madam President, this is Jim Sloan.
go ahead.
I'm kind of disappointed, I have to say, because I sent the questions yesterday, and the question that I wrote was, we received the employment summary produced, which showed 59 vacancies. The question was, are we still budgeting to fill that 59? Having been in around budgets for a long time, that's a good place to put money that can spend elsewhere. So I think that's what Sharon's trying to get at. And I don't see that answer coming from you. Could you help me with that, please?
Okay, Pete, Bill's going to respond, and I see Pete walking up as well.
Mr. Finelli, do you want to jump on that? But I think as far as summary goes, Mr. Sloan, I think the process in the past had been to budget for 100% of our employment staff, whether they were employed or not. If that has changed over the last, at least since I've been here, Cliff touched on it. We budget for the actual hours that we have employees working for us, which then gets transferred into full-term equivalents. And so we budget for that. There's not a whole lot of excess budgeting going on for employees, empty seats. I think Cliff touched on it. We're at 3.
Yeah, so we have 4 FTEs in this budget that we don't currently have, and that's
Right.
based on actual hours.
Right.
So clearly,
When it
if you
comes
look
to-
at the trend,
When it comes to golf course maintenance, for instance, we are down 20, what day is today? I mean, we hire people today and they work for 2 days and they leave by Wednesday because the conditions are miserable. It's a very, very difficult task we have in front of us. I think Todd's crew's down about 20 folks. Do we budget for all 20 folks? No. If a bus were to break down with a bunch of Ukrainians coming off looking for work, I'd hire them tomorrow. They're not here. We can't find people to work, whether it's golf or other scenarios. So when that problem would come about, we would be back to the governing board talking to you about, hey, we have an opportunity to hire some folks. Let's deal with it. But as we sit here today, no. There are a couple of employees or positions that we know we'd really like to hire. We budgeted for those, but there is not an excess of budget dollars for unfilled seats. It's more of the hours that we're looking for as a way to keep the budget down. The chart.
May I follow up,
Yes, please, go ahead.
please? And that, I think that's the question that we were asking, Bill, and I appreciate your answer on that. And so that 4 FTEs could be divided amongst 10 employees, is what you're saying. Could be part-time people as assistants in rec centers, correct?
Sir, yes, sir.
I have to say that the other thing is that the people that I've talked to and the calls that I've gotten, and there's 2 emails yet this morning about don't raise the dues. And this is not a new mantra for folks. They don't like having dues being raised. And beyond the inflation stuff, we know that costs have gone up. Last year was a fertilizer problem, and there's on those kinds of issues. I think that's a better justification as far in addition to the inflation factor. Do you agree with that?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that. Yes, but it is tied to the inflation factor. It's tied to the environmental conditions that we have currently in the world today, the economic times that we find ourselves in. None of us, I think, could have predicted that any kind of development with phosphorus and chemicals, and those are the things that we need to maintain our golf courses, are up how many 100%? Right?
Yes.
Same thing with golf's grass seed. But the governing board's decision to carry on and support that, and I know it was close to a $300,000 decision, but that, I think our finance team will point out that by doing that, I think our golf courses have really reaped the benefit of that, as have we financially, from the number of rounds that people are playing there, the conditions of the course. And I think we recouped that money quite handily. And as we move forward, we're kind of in that same boat, hoping the same thing comes to light. So.
One more question, Madam President. I appreciate that answer, and we did deal with that some time ago and made a vote on that, and it was a good decision. The other question that I sent in for answering was how much money was added to the reserve out of our operating budget last year. Do you have that number for us, please?
I defer to Mr. Finelli.
Sure. It's first of all, it's more than just one item that is transferred from the operating to the reserve fund. But to give a little context, every payment we make for the association comes out of our operating account. So when we pay for payroll, we pay for supplies, insurance, we're paying that out of the operating account. And there's this perception a lot of people have that the reserve funds pays for capital. That's not accurate. We pay all of our capital expenditures out of the operating as well. All the inflows from your dues, from golf revenues, and APF fees all come into the operating account as well. And so at the end of the year, by policy, the operating excess is by policy designated to go to the reserve funds. Already residing in the reserve funds is any dividends that it's earned. By policy, the APFs, the asset preservation fees, are to be directed to the reserve funds. And then there's changes in encumbrance, there's depreciation, there's excess of the spend on capital. If you guys approve $6.4 million, we may spend 5.1 of that and carry over $1.5 million, or we may spend $7 million because we carried over a project from the prior year. So at the end of the year, one component out of all of those is the excess, and that goes into an entry that is audited by our Clifton Larson audit team. It's presented as annually to the V&F committee for approval. That occurred on September 21st of last year, and it was actually fund transferred in November. So all the last year involving any excess or savings on capital, as well as the operating excess, was transferred.
A follow-up on that then, please. So is there a dollar amount that went in? Can you accumulate that into one excess? Why I'm saying this, Pete, is that in the history of Sun City West, we used to almost budget a surplus only to fund the reserve fund. It appears that the reserve fund is to a point where it can sustain itself and solve the problems that we have. I think it's at that limit. So the question I have is, are we budgeting still a surplus to go into the reserve, which would facilitate that dues increase? I think, in my mind, it's all tied together, and that's the stuff I've been hearing.
That's fair. There was a subcommittee that was established last year, or maybe a year and a half ago, from the Budget and Finance to review the investment policy, especially in the wake of some considerable valuation changes that existed in equities in a 1-month period in May of 2020. There was almost a $4.9 million decline in a 30-day period. And so that subcommittee evaluated whether or not this board wanted to maintain the 40% equity exposure, and the decision after governing board approval was to move that to 10%. When we were doing that evaluation, one of the comments that came out of the subcommittee and was discussed by the BNF and ultimately the board was how much are our inflows every year, and how much do we rely on those inflows? And we were very communicative that almost 70% of your inflows come from your asset preservation fees. The second component was, and that was deliberately discussed, was, how much do we rely on the dividends, especially if you're going to rely less on growth and more on the on just the dividends that come off the portfolio, then is that enough to sustain itself in the future modeling? But very, very importantly, and I'm glad we have an audience here, we've mentioned it at the forums, we've mentioned it at BNS before, that a very important part, that people seem to call this a surplus. And I would argue that the modeling that we present every single month, calls for about $1.5 million to come off of this operating excess. And if you are in a HOA that's separate from a large community plan like this, most of you would have your dues of $100, $500 a month that would have a line item that says, how much am I going to spend on repair and maintenance? I ask all of you to look up there, in our reserve replacement. By the way, I should have said, not repair and replacement of just ordinary stuff, but repair and replacement of capital into the future. Well, where do you see in that modeling anything on that? We don't have such a designation, but it's built into our modeling to have about $1.5 million to sustain the repair and replacement. We have a comparison right next to us over at Grand. They have about a $1,600 annual amount for their dues. If you look at their financials, they actually dedicate 25% to go towards their repair and replacement. So roughly 30,000 residents in Sun City West, we pull that $1.5 million, and now you're talking $50. $50 out of your 500 is indirectly designated to go towards repair and replacement for essential keeping of these community assets in good condition. And so I would argue that this is not the surplus that everybody just believes is some kind of impact on your dues. It's a very vital part of their future repair and replacement. If you as a board want to make a choice to amend that, then you're going to get a suffering on the repair and replacement funding.
Okay, any other questions? Sharon?
Just a question then, Pete. In regards to that, Director Standenbein made a comment at our special meeting in regards to a line item. Is that, and maybe Director Standenbein can explain it a little better than I am, is that what you're referring to? What you made the statement about making it a line item on the budget?
Yes.
Is exactly what he's talking about?
That what
Are you
goes
on?
into that fund.
Yeah.
Talking to the
I'm sorry.
microphone.
The comment I made is for transparency. They say the operating profits, well, that's a moving number. Should not the budget have what we plan on putting into that account here as a line item expense? And so that the income and the revenues of Sun City West would flow and hopefully try to break out about even every year. But then there's an additional expense item that would go into the reserve account. And then everybody would know what that is. That amount would go in. And if there was a loss, well, the next year in budgeting, you're going to have to figure out how to make up that loss. If there's a profit, you can leave that in that, and maybe the dues would go down because you've got excess income from the previous year. But then it's a specific amount, it's not a moving amount that goes into the reserve account every year.
And I initially had that concept to be proposed, and there's just, I don't know, it's hard to explain, that it just, COVID was hitting, and, you know, we didn't actually have a lot of in-person discussion, so we actually would welcome that, to be blunt, because constantly we get references to that being, you know, some kind of profit, and I would argue that that's, first of all, we're a nonprofit. All of these, by your own policies, are designated to go there. We would be in good stead to define it as such.
So is this something that probably should go to BNF
BNF next
to
year.
investigate this in the fall
Uh-huh.
as an alternative choice?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could I,
Sharon?
Madam President?
Go ahead, J.J.
Well,
It's fine.
okay, Jim, go ahead.
Pete and Cliff, just for my own information, we received something from the president, I think, about the lack of interest in the forums. Could you speak to that just a little bit? Because we hear a lot of complaining about dues and so forth, but then when the budget presentations happen, they don't show up. Is that something that happened this year as well?
Who's that question to?
Well, all I can say is
Pete.
we, I believe, published that in many forums, at Budget and Finance, the workshops. We announced that.
They are
welcome-
recorded as well, so people get it on YouTube, even if they're not in
can't-
attendance.
I think a little,
I'm not being, excuse me, I'm not being critical. I'm asking the question only because I hear a lot of complaining, but I don't hear a lot of input and people getting involved, and that's a problem for us.
well, there's
Yeah,
always the wonderful newspaper that we read.
that helps.
But yeah, that helps. But when it comes to our meetings, I think with the onset of the media that's available to folks, particularly YouTube, we are seeing a tremendous amount of participation there. 3 years ago, we had budget meetings and we would fill Palm Ridge. I mean, it'd be several hundred people in there. This year, we have all of our budget meetings, be it BNF and then the forums and everything that we've conducted. We've had a couple meetings on Wednesday and then move it to Thursday at different times of day to try to capture people who may be working. But those only yielded less than 20 people. But then in speaking with Martin and the folks in the IT world, over 400 hits. So it's being observed. It's just not in person, and people are seeing it at their own leisure. And, you know, if they do have questions, they have every ability and capability to either call us or email us, be it myself or finance or any of our board members as far as issues or concerns. And that's kind of the way of the world these days, Jim. I'm not real sure. I mean, we can continue to advertise and do what we do, but to get people in the room is not easy. We're sitting in a room today of 100 chairs, and, you know, about a third of those are full. And thank you for being
Again,
here.
Bill, I'm not complaining about this.
No, I get it. I get it.
I'm just observing. And,
Yeah.
yeah. All right,
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Sharon, now your question?
Okay, just as a comment back to what we talked about, referring it back to budget and finance, one of the things in the master plan that's going to come up is how to finance different things. So part of this, if this is just as a comment, is if this is a line item where you have it on the budget, and like Mr. Finelli said, it basically says if you have an overage, or as Director Standenbaum said as well, if you have an overage, you'd be able to set that aside as possibly using for the master plan. You'd have some idea of what you either return it to the residents, you have it set aside, you can use it in different manners than you can today. Today, we don't have any way of doing that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from directors? Okay, audience questions, and we have somebody that wants to speak. Name and number, please.
My name is Peggy Hunter. My number is 65441. I've lived in Sun City West for 22 years. To Mr. Schwing's point and about the budget, at one point I wrote to Mr. Sloan because I didn't realize I should have written it to the golf committee chairman. about the question about why the practice golf balls were replaced and the price went up without any communication to the residents. I wrote and asked if this could be please put on the agenda. I never heard from anyone except from Mr. Sloan to say he was forwarding it to the committee. I did hear from Pat O'Hare. No, sorry, not Pat O'Hare. Yes, Pat O'Hare, who told me that the balls had to be replaced. I understood that. I also asked him why there weren't windshields on the carts, and he told me they were too difficult to repair. When I asked what happened to them and what happened to the old golf balls, were they sold for a profit or what, I have not received an answer yet. I don't want to hear from anyone except the board. So my question never got to the golf committee. If it did, I never received an answer.
I could address a few items. I'm not debating on it, but the price did not change. And yes, there
For
was
golf balls?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, it did.
No, the range ball cost did not change.
It did. We used to pay $4 for 60-something balls, and we now get 50-something.
I may be wrong, but
You
I
are
believe
wrong.
that
I'm sorry.
that was not anything that was presented by the
And I
pad,
understand
so-
the cost
It
of
was,
things.
it
Excuse
was
me.
at the golf committee,
Yeah,
that item was discussed, correct, Harry?
And I think all you have to do, I understand the cost of things, but I think communication to the residents is important. Because when I go out and nothing is said, and I get 50-something balls instead of 62, which I normally got, the cost is the same, and I go into the pro shop and I said, I didn't get enough balls, and they said, oh, we changed it, and that's just the way it is. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the topic of the budget? No, I think we're good. Okay. All right, so we've had our discussion, and this will come to a vote at the end of the month at our regular meeting. Thank you very much for the presentation and the answers to the questions. Okay, the next item on the agenda deals with another policy. As you know, most of our policies are reviewed by each of the committees, but there are 3 sets of policies that are not reviewed by any particular committee, and so those are ones dealing with committees, with legal things, and with membership issues. And so this year, Tim Hurley has been charged with overseeing those policies to see if there are any corrections. So, Tim, you want to talk about this C1?
Sure, thank you, Madam President. Policy C1 deals with standing and special committees, and one of the things that we've tried to do with the other non-committee specific policies has been to try to bring them up to date, since we live in a digital era now. Several of these were written back when everything was analog and there were paper copies of things like that. And that basically is what the change to C1 is. It's in section 3.7.2, and I read it: committee meetings are considered general work sessions and often result in far-ranging discussions. Hence, a formal agenda is encouraged, but shall not be made mandatory. In the event that an agenda is published for the committee's use, copies has been crossed out, redlined, and added in as hard copies and/or on-screen agendas shall be /provided available to /all owner members and associate members in attendance. This is just a matter of cleaning up analog versus digital.
Okay, any discussion, questions on the board? Sharon?
Okay, it's my understanding that you can't bring something up on a committee agenda unless it's printed in advance. Am I incorrect in that? That you have to have something out in advance on the committee agenda. You're saying that you do not have to have that, is that correct? Am I getting that correct?
No,
No, I'm not,
No.
okay, so what is it exactly? I thought that this says that you,
this is just the difference between having hard copies available and
Right.
having on-screen or hard copies available.
I understand that, but it says it's, a formal agenda is encouraged but not mandatory.
Right.
So what I'm saying to you is if I wanted to say, we have a budget and finance committee tomorrow, and I'm just using this as an example, and I want to bring something up. I don't have to have it to somebody 24, 48 hours in advance, and I can bring it up anytime I want. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
We're talking about committee meetings,
Yeah,
and committee meetings are different than board or workshop meetings.
right, I understand.
So it is encouraged to have agendas, and if there is an agenda, will be made available, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a hard copy agenda.
Right, so can I, it still doesn't answer this, because that sentence indicates that I could bring something up and put it on an agenda prior to the meeting. It doesn't say anything about the fact, that if I don't have to have a formal agenda, then I can't be asked to put something on an agenda prior to when you hold it.
According to the state statutes, Title 33,
Right.
all of our meetings, because we're a planned community, must be open meetings. And the state statute specifies that there has to be notification 48 hours in advance of the meetings, okay? So those notices are on board docs. There usually is an agenda on board docs.
Right.
Those have to be posted 48 hours in advance.
Okay,
Okay, all this deals with is having agendas at the meeting. It doesn't change any of the statutes that say what you have to do and what you don't have to do. All it is a hard copy versus a screen copy.
I understand, I just don't like the sentence on 37.2, because it says, hence, a formal agenda is encouraged but not mandatory. So when you're telling me that the Arizona statute says I have to have this printed in advance, that's not what that sentence says.
So are you suggesting that we should be changing that sentence as
Yes.
well?
Yes, there has to be something else other than that sentence, because that sentence specifically states I don't have to have an agenda at all.
Okay, Lisa?
Thank you, President Fitzsimons. Director Hurley?
Yes.
Do we have a copy of the Arizona statute that we can look at? Perhaps that would.
This is the one meeting I didn't bring.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I know you always have that stuff available
I know,
for
I
us.
know. I could probably look it up here real quick, but I think what the statute says is meetings have to be announced 48
Right.
hours in advance, is what
Right.
the statute reads.
Right. And if I'm interpreting that correctly, President Fitzsimons, I think that by announcing the meeting 48 hours in advance, it's not mandatory that we present the agenda. Is that correct, Tim, by the statute?
The statute says the meeting has to be, there. You have to provide enough information to people reasonable, in a reasonable amount of time, which is the 48 hours, so people will understand what is going to be discussed at the meeting. So yes, that's an agenda. And those are posted on board docs 48 hours in advance, okay? The way the Robert's Rules of Order go, if it's not on the agenda, it should not be discussed at the meeting.
Correct. Correct.
So, we haven't changed anything, we still abide by all that. All we're suggesting by this change is rather than having hard copies at the door for people to pick up when they come in, that if it's up on the screen, that suffices for having agendas available.
I get it. Thank you, Tim.
Okay,
If I may?
yes,
Just to
go
maybe
ahead.
help Sharon a little bit. If you go to the BNF meeting
Right.
on Tuesday, and whatever you want to talk about is not on the agenda,
Right.
there is an agenda item typically at the bottom of every agenda that asks for comments.
Right.
You can make that comment there.
Right.
The board would not, the committee would not address it. They would hear your comment
Right.
and thank you. And if the board then decides that they want to put that on as an agenda item in the future, they could do that. Hence, the agendas really give us an opportunity to be prepared for the meeting and address the things on the agenda. But
Understand.
public comment, we get it all the time. I don't see her here. Oh, yeah, you are. Talking about medium dogs, right? Medium dog parks. Hello, right? No, that's not an agenda item, but if you want to talk about it today, we certainly can. But anyway.
I understand
that's
that.
where
I'm
you're
just suggesting that maybe Tim could take a look, or Director Hurley could take a look at 3.7.2's first sentence and correct it. Because that's what I'd like to see done. And I'm
Madam
not, I
President?
understand.
Madam President?
Yes, Jim? Go ahead.
Tim, while we're cleaning up stuff here, if you go to 3.1, it references the governing board manager, which is not correct anymore.
Not correct terminology.
The terminology it's a quick fix, and while you're doing it, you might as well fix that.
Okay, and what number is that again?
3.1, 3.1, chairperson shall provide a list of current voting and non-voting members to the committee, to the governing board manager, which is now the
Yeah.
executive assistant, I believe.
Yes.
We don't have it, and then it's again in the next sentence.
All right, good catch, Jim.
Okay, Tim will make those
Yes.
corrections. Okay, and then consider the option that Sharon has brought up as
Yes.
well. Okay.
Will do.
Any other suggestions, comments from the audience? Okay, do we have a consensus to bring this to the meeting at the end of the month with corrections sent to us or ideas sent to us?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Are we gonna have this cleaned up about, it says formal agenda is encouraged, but shall not be mandatory? That seems sort of contradictory.
I'll check that with the statutes.
Okay,
Because the terminology in here, work session, is a little
Different.
confusing. It should just say meetings, and those meetings, our committee meetings fall under the statute, so they have to be. So, but I'll look that up again. I'll look it up and have it I'll send it to Sue over the weekend.
Okay, and we can pass that to you, and if we don't get it ready by the end of the month, we'll push it back to the following month? Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. Okay, now, next item on the agenda is the master plan research findings summary. And you have, we've got a great PowerPoint for us, and do you want to introduce?
Very, very briefly, I'd like to introduce the CEO and the founder of M3B Incorporated. Ms. Michelle Mace is here today, and she will be presenting the findings of about 9 months worth of research and the survey that over 5,000 people participated in, looking forward to the future of Sun City West as a first portion of our master plan update. And I will turn it over to Michelle. I think we're going to maybe dim some lights. Don't anyone fall asleep. Get comfortable, enjoy yourselves, because I think you're going to learn some things about Sun City West we don't know. So, Michelle, all you.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, and thank you. I'm so happy to see faces in the room. I do appreciate that people are watching via YouTube, and I'm glad that there's an opportunity for people who can't be here to do that. But as a presenter, it is so nice to have faces. I'm choosing to stand down here instead of up at the podium because I want to see the slides as you see them. I didn't script a speech. There's a lot of data here. It's going to feel a bit like a data tornado. And I want to be able to talk to it, but I also want to be sensitive to, I know that our meeting can only go till 11. So I'm going to speak to each slide, but I am excited to be able to share this with you. Let me just make sure my laser is working. Yeah, that's a tiny red dot. Okay. So, the presentation, I call this the illumination, really trying to give light to your master plan process for the rec centers of Sun City West. It's also resident and it's generational research. So it's been a long process by many people, yourselves included, to come to an understanding. I'd like to give you a little background on myself. Some of you know me. I've gotten to moderate focus groups with some of you, but for most of you that don't know me, my name is Michelle Mace. My company is M3B. The M's are Michelle Marie Mace, my initials, and the B is actually my childhood nickname, Beowulf. Who does that? Well, my father was an English teacher and loves literature and poetry, so my sister and I were always being nicknamed after literary characters, and I think that was my dad's way of encouraging us to look up, well, who's Crescenda? Which one are you? You know, and it taught us to probably be curious about literature. So anyway, I have a boutique consultancy. I've had my company for 23 years. I'm focused, my work is focused in guiding developers, home builders, hospitality, and healthcare companies to their consumers. So I'm continuously studying humans, human behaviors, consumers, and trying to help my clients get closer to who their customers are and what they care about. Prior to forming my company in the mid-'80s, I would say that people have said to me, and so I just use what is true, is I've studied life backwards. When I was in college, I was a political pollster. I ended up running the ASU Public Opinion Research Center. During my time at ASU, I developed a great interest in human aging and development. I had a great love for my grandmother. We had a very close relationship, and I wanted her to live forever. As a director, so my love of seniors and research and aging, I ended up becoming the director of research for a senior housing developer that did assisted living, skilled nursing communities around the country. And they asked me to use their data for my master's thesis, which was quite an honor. And I developed a model on lifestyle satisfaction in retirement communities. And that model that I built many years ago, interestingly, the prediction of satisfaction for residents had a lot to do with food, dining experiences, because food is about memory. And it's about nostalgic moments and times when we gather with others. One of the other predictors of satisfaction that I think is important, especially in an environment like today where it's hard to find people. You know, we just heard discussion about open positions. One of the predictors of lifestyle satisfaction in a retirement community is actually the happiness of the employees that are serving you, because you're engaging with them. So, monitoring that satisfaction in how we serve one another, how they care for you and how you care for them in an everyday way matters. So I just bring that up because it was interesting to hear some of the discussion earlier today. I went from that senior housing side, studying the oldest of old and centenarians, to work at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they asked me to head up their active adult community consulting practice, which got me in that time in the 80s into golf communities. And I had the great fortune of being approached by the National Golf Foundation and the Women's and the LPGA to perform the largest body of research ever on women in golf and the impact that women would have on the sport. And it was in Florida that I presented this large body of research in the 80s, and Del Webb had executives present there, and I walked off the stage and they asked me to come interview for a position with them at the corporate office. So in the 90s, I spent a decade with Del Webb Corporation, had the amazing opportunity to be in that company when we were building the last phase of Sun City West. So my background at Del Webb was in master plan research and developing the KPIs, the key performance indicators for the company and how Wall Street would look at us. I, in my tenure there, built the Million Man database, which was really the consumers that were coming in and understanding how we needed to interact with them to build these communities, to convert them to enjoy the active adult lifestyle. Some of you may have experienced the Vacation Getaway Program, which is something that I also did at Del Webb. It was an opportunity for people to come in and sample this amazing lifestyle before they bought it. So my background, I'm sharing and spending this time on me so that you can understand that I appreciate you. I appreciate listening to seniors my whole life. I used to say I love old people and I hope to be one someday, but I am now one and I'm qualified to live here. So I actually think this is midlife, by the way. The outer limits of life are 120. So we're all just in midlife right now. So anyway, just appreciate you entertaining a little bit of opportunity for me to share more about me and my appreciation for you. I care about how, bless you, I care about how happy you are here and how this lifestyle is working for you. I care about active adult communities. It's a concept that I've been involved in creating around the country. So I care about how these places live and the contribution that these communities make to society. So talking about master planning, the research that we've been doing, not asking you questions just to ask you questions. It's because we're really embarking on an idea of how to evolve place. And the way that I approach master planning in my business, this horse is actually the watermark for my company. It's an image of a wild horse. And it's about the image of the wild horse. I start with the head of the horse because the head of the horse, they're very intelligent animals. And I like to spend a lot of time getting what I call to the intimate knowledge of the who, getting to know you well, getting to know my clients' customers well. And then taking an informed approach to how we solve problems, thinking through what is the best way to address this. There isn't one way to solve everything. And then working at the gut of the horse, which is the instinctive truths. We do a survey, which is some quantitative information, and then we analyze it. We think we understand it, but then we start to have dialogue with you, and we realize, oh, there was more to it, or there was a slightly different understanding. So getting at the instinctive truths and spending time in conversation is important. And all of that brings us around to ultimately kind of get up on the back of that horse and have breakthroughs and feel free in what we're doing. And what we're all trying to do is get unstuck and feel free. And so the master plan process is a really exciting, complex process. It brings diverse disciplines and diverse people together necessarily every day around the country. So my goal is to always make sure we have the right people in the room, the right professionals, the right voices, the right consumer representation, so that when we're talking about placemaking, we create a coherent and meaningful experience for everybody. So that's where we're headed, and that's the horse. When you see the horse on my title slides, that's representing the breakthrough that I'm trying to help you all have. So where are we at this point? Research informs the master plan, the creation of it, and the iterations of it. Where we are right now is kind of in these red zones of the gathering and sharing with you now the intimate knowledge of who and what we've learned and the instinctive truths. So the research completed to date is really 4 pieces. A resident survey that over 5,000 people participated in. That's going to be in the data tornado I'm going to share with you shortly. The resident focus groups, there were nearly 100 of you that I was able to have really great dialogue with. It was quick 1-hour hits, but boy, was it informative for me to hear what was important to you. And then there's a compilation of some Gen X research that was done. And so I reviewed and analyzed that. In addition, I looked at generational trends because I think one of the first things that was sort of jaw-dropping for me, because I hadn't really sat back and looked at the forest in a while, is that active adult communities are now 3, maybe even 4 generations, including that many generations. They're multi-generational places. When I started with Del Webb creating these places so many years ago and taking them viral across the country, we were talking to the greatest generation. We had kind of one, maybe started talking to, 2 generations. So it's a more dynamic place now. And I think that that's really important. So what I've done is taken your resident data, the surveys that you all completed, the focus groups, the compilation of information on Gen X, that group that's coming into the communities, and then also balancing that with generational voices and making sure that, so that's what I'm going to share with you today. I hope you enjoy it. It's been a fun process for me. But to help you all sit at ease, because I know what you really want to know is, so what did you hear and what are the priorities that came out of that? Did you really hear me? So I'm going to share with you, there were kind of 5 big ideas that came out. This is not to say that other things didn't get said or wouldn't be addressed. This is not fully inclusive, but these are 5 big themes that I heard and that came through all 4 pieces. And one was that you wanted a restaurant or some kind of a food and beverage experience, okay? And that was rather interesting because remember I told you my thesis on lifestyle satisfaction. I'm like, oh wow, isn't that interesting? It's, there's food again. Enhanced walking experiences. And I'm kind of globalizing it, not to say you specifically, a track or a trail, but enhanced walking experiences. In the surveys that you all returned, 5,000 surveys, there were times that there would be 2,000 or more comments. So I'm not just running a tabulation on a percentage of people that said something. I'm having to go through and then not have to get to. There was a really interesting read comments. And then I have to kind of roll it up and say, what did those comments equate to? There's a lot of conversation about people wanting an enhanced or a different walking experience. Live entertainment venues, both indoor, outdoor, changes to kind of how you receive performance and performing arts. And then the creation of arts was another common theme, and the spaces and the clubs surrounding that. And then, maybe not surprising, more and covered pickleball, fastest growing sport in the country, folks. So it showed up as a priority, and when I say priority, meaning these were large chunks of data that emerged. So hopefully that at least helps you understand some of what's coming forward. I'm going to now continue. So when somebody has a microphone on? Oh, it's a Zoom connection. Okay. Nobody has a question I need to address? Okay. So when I was fortunate to be reintroduced back to Sun City West and had an opportunity to meet your board and talk about moderating your focus groups, it was really nice I was sitting in Austin, Texas, where I live now, and on Zoom with some of your board members, and I think they were checking my qualifications and do I know what I'm doing, and we started talking about if we could create a focus group and a discussion with the residents, what would you want to know? And there were 2 really insightful questions that your board members came up with, and I thought they were really fantastic. And one was, how do potential changes in Sun City West recreation amenities make you feel? We got to deal with this feeling thing. And when I brought it up in the focus groups and had you write down feeling words, this is what came out. And the largest words is a way for me to represent to you what was said the most. The word excited was used the most often. That's really cool, right? Like something exciting is going to happen here. And you're hopeful, right? We're hopeful that it's going to go well, that you're going to get what you want. And there's concern, and there's curiosity, and there's happiness, and there's worry. So this is a myriad of complex emotions that all of you may experience at different times in the process. This is master planning, by the way. This is my life. And as a developer, developers get a bad rap, but the conversations contain these emotions, and that you're feeling it is normal, that you're expressing it is normal. And something that we need to, and if I'm fortunate enough to continue working with you, stay attentive to, because managing these emotions is important. And the next question that came out from one of your board members is said, okay, well, how do we make change easier for them? And I think that was actually Sue, to give her credit. She cared a lot about how you felt about it and how do we make change easier for you. And so these were some of the things that came up, and I think this was even in the woman who came to the podium here earlier this morning, is better communication, transparency, share the decisions, give us the facts, the benefits, and the rationale. She wants to understand the price on the bucket is the same, but the balls are a lower count, and I don't understand. Can I have some rationale? So I heard from you that that's what you want, and convey that as we go through the master plan process. I agree, that's important. Sharing, holding resident meetings and listening sessions. So we've done some of that in the master plan process. I said iterative. There's gonna be the need to continue to come back to you and get that refinement and engagement. You wanted updates on the longer term projects. That would be part of the master plan process, is to let you know what's going on, what's the long term, what's the short term timing. But it takes time to get there. This is building that plan is not a tomorrow thing. So having multimodal communication, you guys even said be redundant. Tell me 3 different ways, because maybe I'm not going to see it on my phone, or maybe I'm not going to get it on an email or a hard copy. So you also asked us to do a utilization study. That came up in the focus groups. You want to understand what of your amenities are being over and underutilized. You wanted to eliminate political views from the process. You want some of the items to come to resident vote. You want to make sure that in the master plan process, professionals are being engaged, so money's not being wasted. And we're not going to haphazardly do something and then have to redo it because we didn't think it through. And this is just me telling you what you've told me. You want to keep the costs in check, make sure that you're getting what you need, and that the needs are being balanced with the wants. And you wanted to update and enforce the CCNRs. So generally, I was pleasantly surprised and excited that on a scale of 1 to 7, how Sun City West residents felt about change, you're rating yourselves a 5.4. You're saying I'm pretty ready. And I think that's exciting, and it matches the emotions. So the next steps in the master plan process, before I start getting into the data tornado, as I'm calling it, that I see, is that my recommendation would be you do a utilization study. That utilization study means all this counting that you're doing with your key cards to check into your clubs and your facilities. That's a bit frustrating, maybe annoying. I understand maybe you had to wait in a line and it was pretty hot, and so maybe we need to get more machines. But that purpose of doing it is going to inform this master plan process to understand how many people are in what spaces when, and help us understand the supply and demand gaps in the facility spaces. So that takes time. It's got to happen over a period of time, monitoring that. So that's ongoing, and recommended that you continue that process. I also recommend that you form what I would call amenity-specific work groups. So as we're going to approach certain concepts, or whether it be enhanced walking experiences or pickleball or whatever it is, that we have some informed resident board employee amenity-specific work groups. And I do mean all 3 of those groups working together side by side, so that there is good communication flow between everyone, and there's good input. So my recommendation is that we would form some of these groups around the recommended concepts. We'd have to get to the creation of vision concepts. Professionals would be involved in that. I'm also recommending a master plan panel that would provide insight. The master plan panel, I'm going to talk about at the end of my presentation, but I've had the great fortune of meeting Bob, the head of the Torch Committee, and I will talk to you more about what I think would be extremely helpful to the professionals that are going to help you in that process. So then obviously staff and board need to work together to establish a capital asset budget for whatever those vision concepts are that you guys agree you want to move forward on, ultimately finalizing that master plan vision and budget so there's no surprises and implementation can begin. So that's kind of the roadmap broadly that I see would make sense. There's probably a myriad of other steps or details inside of those, but I think those are the big ideas that I see. So now I'm going to step us into a data tornado. Some of you might love data. Some of you might go, ooh, just hang with me. Let's have a little bit of fun. I'm going to be talking to you about you. Okay, and what you shared with me, and also some things I've gathered on national trend data. So we had a 20% survey participation rate. That's fantastic. As a pollster, I love that kind of participation. We had higher responses from married people and from people aged 65 to 74. Why do I share that? Because as I look at survey data, I need to be aware of where there might be some overrepresentation or underrepresentation of voices so that I can go back later and make sure we pull out certain populations and check things by them, because for some reason maybe completing the survey didn't work for them or didn't work at that time. So we do have higher responses from married and people aged 65 to 74. We had high participation from two-person households. Again, that could be the married thing. One of the things I'd like you to see is when you see the orange numbers, that's Sun City West, and on these particular next two slides, the orange is the population or your households. 58% of Sun City West households, according to the statistical data coming out of Claritas, which is a kind of a census estimator, 58% of your households are two-person households here. I thought that was a little bit low, but that's what the data is showing. Your resident surveys, I had 80% response from two-person households. So just want to, again, share that point. We had 96% response rate from owners, but we're showing that inside Sun City West, about 90% of the homes are actually owner-occupied, and 10% are renter-occupied. So our owners did overrepresent, which I think is probably fine. And the time of the years lived within Sun City West is the bottom right chart. We had the largest representation, 28% almost, from people who lived here 6 to 10 years. So one of the things that we'll be doing, and I recommend you continue to do in the master plan process, is you got to keep your eye on the competition, right? And so we say, well, who is the competition? And one of the ways that I would address who's your competition is there was a survey question that said the top 10 communities that residents considered before you bought here or before you moved here. Well, these are the 10 that showed up and that make up the bulk of the response. And the number one place you thought of going instead of coming to Sun City West was Sun City Grand. And the other was Sun City. So your neighboring communities. So it seemed like you were pretty location driven. And then what I would say the common themes and the names that are showing up is that they're mostly in the West Valley, age qualified communities with golf and recreation centers, walking trails, pickleball courts, casual dining, and that it was most likely a community built by Del Webb or Ed Robeson. So one of the interesting notes that, and I know some people probably think we hear a lot about the baby boomers nationally, so we probably in our mind's eye think they're much larger than that, but they're actually 22% of the country. And if you go directly across the pie to the blue slice, the millennials, we hear a lot also about millennials. They're sized generationally about the same as the baby boomers. That purple pie slice, that's my group, Gen X. Kind of, we get lost in the middle of those two big pieces of pie, and we're only 2% smaller, but that's how it goes. And Gen Z is about equal to Gen X. Gen Alpha, interestingly, the population of our country that's below 8 is about the same size as the population of our country that's over 76. So just thought you might find that an interesting piece of information as we continue to talk today. Because as we move forward, we're going to have a conversation about the baby boomers, about multiple generations, actually. But when I talk about the baby boomers, I'm not talking about your Sun City West Social Club. Okay, that's not, when I use the word boomer to annotate my conversation today, I'm not talking ever about the Boomers Club. So just to be really clear about that. I'm talking about a generation of people that are defined clearly as a cohort because of the sharp increase in birth rate that followed World War II, known as the baby boom. So the youngest members of the boomers are retiring in 2029. They're not all retired yet. And they make up, like I said, about 22% of the population. So this chart's a bit full. I hesitated throwing it up there, but I think it's kind of fun. It's a bit small type. You do have it in what was provided to you prior. So if you're interested and want to read it in detail, it is interesting. This is a collage of key events that have shaped generations. And when I spoke with you after I did the focus groups, I wanted to make it really clear that there's 3 generations living here. And actually today I'm here to tell you there's 4. I had some great help from the Sun City West membership staff this morning, David, to really refine that even further for me. And I'm actually, there's 4 generations here. So the 4th generation is the oldest generation, which is the greatest generation. And why does this matter? It matters because we're master planning. And we're master planning in an environment no longer for one generation. When Del Webb did this, we were doing it for 1 or 2 generations. There was a lot of homogeneity. That's not the way it is anymore. When we look at this chart up above, we start with the silent generation just as an example. The beginning of the blue bar where it's a little bit faded is where the silent generation is a baby boomer to use a portal than a silent gen person to use a portal. And I dug into that, well, what's going on with that? And it's because the baby boomers are oftentimes, when they go to the doctor, they're bringing mom and maybe even an adult child, or they're having conversations with the doctor about 3 different people in their life that they're caring for and trying to help manage. And now if they tried to put something on a portal, it's like which person and how, So it's interesting how doctors are finding right now interfacing with baby boomers, because baby boomers are kind of sandwiched in caring for aging parents and possibly even kids or grandkids. When we talk about the generations and climate, there's some pretty consistent prioritization that climate should be a top priority to ensure a sustainable planet for future generations. 57% of the silent generation and boomers feel it should be a top priority, 63% on Gen X, and as you move to younger generations, it's even higher. The Gen X folks were the first to list a natural disaster as, remember those key impacts on our life, what's impacted our life. The first time a natural weather event appeared for any generation was Gen X, and it was the Hurricane Katrina event. And now it's going to become increasingly, more common. But one of the things that I think is important, and I've already participated in witnessed meetings that you've all had regarding water. A major part of your master plan update is going to be about water. It involves coordination with the Arizona Department of Water Resources and staying attuned to the conservation programs and the management strategies. We're now in a 5th management period about how we need to stay in compliance to assure the water supply for our population. So you're going to see that have to be a continued part of this discussion on master plans. Governance. When we look at governance versus the population, these 3 generations hold 98% of the federally elected and appointed positions. So they're leading. These 3 generations are the leaders of our country, but they make up 49% of the population. So they're speaking for people who can't have voices yet. You know, maybe younger populations, not ready, not qualified. And politically, they're making 95% of the donations. So it's just something to stay attuned to. When we're talking about governance here at Sun City West, and you're in the process of looking at boards and electing committees, I encourage you to think about your leadership. And how representative is it of the 3 or 4 generations that are actually here? And try to make sure voices are at the table so that you don't have complaining later and you have creative outcomes. So in the survey, we asked what would encourage you to participate more in board or committee meetings. And I want to skip you to that bottom box at the bottom. 56% of the respondents said, I'm happy with my level of participation. But that means that there's a big opportunity because 44% said, I could be encouraged to participate more. That made me really happy. I'm happy to hear that today, I listened in to your earlier discussion and you'd like more participation in your forums. Well, 44% are saying you could encourage me to participate more by doing the following things. I need a better understanding of what the board does. I want to know the agenda in advance. I want to feel welcome or heard. I'd like the meetings to be less contentious. I'd like the board to be caring and easily approachable. I'd like to know the agenda is authentic and not predetermined. And can you remind me? I have a busy schedule. People want to be reminded about the board meetings. You've got so much activity here. It's not surprising that, the board meeting, just you missed it. And maybe some hospitality surrounding encouraging people to come in person, Skipping to the bottom, the evening board meetings, that 11% of the pie, there's people still working. They have a busy schedule, so when things are done during the day, it's harder for them to engage. So something to think about if you're in charge of some committees or clubs. And then some other things that people said, I could be encouraged, but I need a little more time to settle into Sun City West. We heard that. I need some help with YouTube. And other people said, I just need some time off. I'm a little burned out. Maybe it's from work. Maybe it's from already having served. What we heard from you and what we learned is that your participation style in a meeting such as this varies by generation. That the Gen X are going to be more inclined to watch it on YouTube. Maybe they're at work. Maybe they're getting ready for work. And the silent generation is going to be the most likely to show up in person and show their faces. So, and the boomers are kind of, balancing both. The participation in voting, the silent generation as a percentage of who they are here has the highest efficacy of voting. And the other thing that matters in terms of voting in a board election is how long you've lived in Sun City West. It seems that the longer you're here, perhaps you feel more qualified or educated to make your vote, or you figure out what the systems are and you vote. But those are a couple of the impacts. So we had 25% of the survey respondents said they reached out to the board with questions or concerns, but we didn't have another question that let us know how if they were satisfied, did they get those questions answered? So we know that they're reaching out. I don't have, I'm sorry, any answer on whether or not those questions got addressed. What would encourage you to run for a board seat? So the biggest answer box, 41%, was other. So it was a variety of reasons. Some people can't be encouraged because they're not interested or they have a health concern. But for the most part, there was give me more information. A lot of people said, I want the Torch Academy first. And that's a fantastic opportunity. I don't know how excited or possible it is to expand that program and how many more people would go into it, but what a brilliant program to help people know the community and be able to lead and represent. People have said, they want to live here a little longer before they run. So board professionalism matters. I know in one of the sessions I was at recently, I think Tim brought up talking about a code of conduct. I think that would seemingly be appreciated, that people want to make sure that that there's and maybe we have to teach them. Maybe we have to teach people Robert's Rules of Orders. We can't assume everybody knows those things. So volunteerism, a big part of this community, a big part of how this community has operated successfully for so many years. Sun City West residents volunteer more than your national peers. And that's not surprising. That's one of the things, the hallmarks I remember we always talked about at Del Webb, and how proud we were of Sun City West residents and Del Webb residents in general because of their volunteerism. The silent generation as a population in our country volunteers at a rate of 25%. In Sun City West, you guys volunteer at a rate of 46%. Nearly twice that of your national peers. It's really fantastic. The baby boomers volunteer currently at a rate of about 31% in the country and 43% here at Sun City West. Gen X is 36% volunteerism in the country and 40% at Sun City West. So just interesting to know these are trends, and what might be driving it. But you can see on the left-hand side the value of U.S. volunteerism to our country. And imagine the value of the volunteerism to your community. So when you don't want to have dues increases or you want things done or better, think about how you can serve yourself through volunteerism to avoid having to hire people that perhaps right now are difficult to find and expensive to have as a means to an end. And to that point, 80%, so while 44% of Sun City West residents currently volunteer, 80% volunteer right here. So that is a direct impact on your budget and your dues and your community. Historically, I recall there was a posse, the Prides, Sun Health Auxiliaries, Service Clubs. I'm not sure where all those are at today in your community, but those are groups that were providing critical services to this community. When we ask people, do you volunteer? 44% obviously said yes. That's what I've been referring to. 37% said I don't, but I plan to. Or I'm sorry, 37% said I don't, and I don't plan to. So there's 37% who don't want to participate in a volunteer way here in the community. And they say the reasons they don't is they don't want a long-term commitment. So I don't know, maybe we could find some short-term commitments and they can still be helpful. There's 32% who say they're too busy and it just doesn't fit my schedule. 22% have no desire. 7% say I need some help. I need to get started. I need some training, so maybe grab somebody and help them get started. 4% don't feel appreciated or welcome. And look, sometimes this is really hard work and we need to be thoughtful and careful with people who are volunteering, because I think most of us mean well, and to not feel appreciated after we're trying is difficult. So 19%, that's a really nice number out there that plan to volunteer within a year. So, whatever we can do to get them engaged would be great. Sun City West residents, golf participation. So, right, we're a community built on golf. We have hundreds of thousands of rounds here per year. It was built in a time when golf courses were in major expansion mode. And I was involved in a lot of that around the country. And now golf courses are nationally in a contraction mode. And the golf courses that are going away tend to be golf courses with lower greens fees, lower rounds dues. It's those experiences tend to be the ones that are going away and struggling. Golfers did grow in the pandemic by 2%. And another thing that grew, not just in the pandemic, but has been anyway, is what we call off-course golf. So there's people starting to get in the game of golf. Women and beginners are getting in the game of golf in an off-course way. So it's through driving ranges, places like Topgolf, maybe going to putting greens, doing things that aren't getting them on the course. And so this is an indicator that look, they might transition to the golf course eventually, which would be great. When we look at golf here, just to show you how golf passionate we are. 7% of the population of Silent Gen, less than 7% golfs. 45% of the Silent Gen in Sun City West golfs. And when I say golfs, this is, they've said in the survey they played golf. They might have not done it every year. They might do it once a year, but and they might be an off-course golfer, but this is the number. At Sun City West, for the boomers, it's 48% have indicated they have played golf. Now, that's not, they're not playing rounds every week. This is not saying that. This is saying they might have gone out and hit a ball at a driving range. And then for Gen X, it's 49%. But look at Gen X's number in the population, 10% are out there golfing. So there's a good group of golfers coming up. And the golf magazines that I've read have indicated that Gen X is interested in the sport. And it could be good for the game and certainly would be good for Sun City West if they feel welcome here and can fit into the community. So have you golfed Sun City West golf courses? 47% said they had, but we know from member data that 20% probably golf annually. So weekly golf, when you look at the bar charts to the right, is more common among people over 70 than under 70, which is really cool, you know? So our older residents are out there more often. 93% believe that our golf fees are good value. 95% rate the courses as excellent or good condition. And in the competitive set that we talked about earlier of 10 communities, only Sun City has more golf courses than Sun City West. And that's if we don't use the private clubs. But either way, I think they're slightly, have slightly more. So we asked you, do you partake in golf-related activities? A restaurant and patio is the most popular activity that you partake in outside of being on golf. So 23% are saying I use the golf restaurant. 21% use the driving range. Equal number are using the putting green, the pro shop. Rates up there, taking golf lessons, using a golf simulator. And then we say, well, what could we do to encourage non-golfers to play golf? And offer free lessons and social events was the number one answer. So help me get into the game. Guys, it's still an expensive sport, right? If I don't know how to, if I don't own clubs, or I have to pay for range balls, or I have to pay for a round, but I'm scared to get out on the course because, gosh, I might wreck it. And, you know, it can be intimidating. And so what can we do? 23% of you said free lessons, some instruction. Others said, help me cover some of the costs to get started. Provide some social events with friends. And if their spouse or a friend would encourage them, they'd get out there. Have some loaner equipment. Make it less stressful, less intimidating. Make it a shorter time commitment. And that's, you know, like, what can we do to, and there's all kinds of creative things going on, probably here and around the country, to let people just get out and have a golf light experience to encourage them into the game in a bigger way. So one of the other national trends that's actually overtaken golf in master plan communities now for several years, a lot of developers don't want to build golf courses, the cost, the sustainability of it. So the number one amenity really nationally in master plan communities is walking trails. And here in our community, the way that we asked you the question, 5 to 10% of you said you use the walking track as a most used amenity. That's not a great correlate to the national trend, because the national trend is more about trails and naturally occurring walking spaces. So, but I'm just trying to share with you that what we did hear from you is that walking matters. Whether it's an indoor track, an outdoor track. Your Gen Xs prefer your outdoor track. Your Silent Gen prefers your indoor track. Trails inside the focus groups. Can you see? Do you need lights? Okay. The trails number 2 and 3 most requested improvement when we were in the focus group discussions would be to enhance the walking experience here with more shade, more benches, some green or colorful areas of landscaping, some trash bags and dog waste receptacles. A lot of you said, I want to use the golf course for walking. And so that's a discussion. that's a technical discussion that's got to involve a lot of people who understand golf course maintenance, and yet the desire to be out there. So this is just what was high marks on the survey, and you wanted longer hours for your indoor walking track. So this is just sharing back with you what you shared with me. Another piece of the master plan that I think you're going to want to address is the performing arts. I heard a lot about live entertainment and having a space for your live entertainment. Silent Gen is attending 2 to 3 events a year. Boomers are attending about 3 events a year, and Gen X is attending about 3 events a year. And you're getting about a 50% attendance rate in the country generationally, and here it's probably at least that or similar. So the performing arts space, what I heard from you is that a lot of you were using Beardsley Park as a most used amenity, and you would like an expansion or remodel of these live performance spaces. And the top suggestions that you were asking us to consider, or the community consider, was an amphitheater or a larger venue for outdoor live entertainment programming. You want to be prioritized as residents for tickets, and I think Casey's already taken care of that. I think I heard her make an announcement at a recent meeting that they adjusted things so that now residents have priority. You want improvements to sound system and acoustics, and an improved screen and rehearsal spaces. So working between those. Your competitive communities have well-utilized amphitheaters, so there's certainly an argument out there for some kind of an outdoor venue. Talking about your clubs, how will Gen X's independence impact clubs? One of the things that Gen X, we talked about that they're the small business owners, they're the entrepreneurs, and Sun City West was a community that was built on belonging. And that was a phrase that we used marketing this community, is all the things that you could join. And Silent Gen, here, 73% of Silent Gen belong to a club here in Sun City West, and an average of 2 clubs, similar to baby boomers. The Gen X isn't quite in the same belonger category. Now, I don't know if it's just because they're young and they're going to age into it, or maybe we don't have the clubs that they need. But one of the things that the data did show is they feel the least welcome. So when we're looking at clubs and I would encourage us to think about how can we be more welcoming to one another, particularly if we're of a different a generation. We may need to step out of our comfort zone a little bit. 28% of our residents, according to the survey, don't belong to a club at all, but otherwise the majority do. The clubs that create and perform arts were large favorites, were big favorites, and looking at arts, dance, and music. And this mirrors the national trend that we're seeing, that nationally 30% of each generation is interested in clubs that create. They're creators and makers. So that's your arts, crafts, woodworking, metal, photography, beading, where these things were the crafting and the maker clubs were getting very high marks. And in the focus groups, it was fascinating that when I asked people in the focus groups, would you try something new in 2022? And depending on the group, but it was between 45 and 62% said, yeah, I'll try something new in 2022. And those were the things that they were talking about, was the creator maker clubs as heavy, the dance, and I should throw dance and music into that as well. So one of the other pieces, I know I'm running out of time here, is the restaurant and shaping the dining experience. If we're looking at generations, I'm sorry, my slides have slipped somehow, the titles have all dropped, is if we're crafting a food experience, being sensitive that the silent generation is more traditional in their desires, eating out is special, and for the baby boomers, they're loyalists. They'll return for good service. They want familiar food, but give me a little creative twist on it, please, and make sure it's clean. The Gen X group is looking for ambiance, atmosphere, food variety, adventure. So we got a lot of audiences to please. As always, that's a challenge. But there was certainly in creating a bar for these folks, a restaurant bar experiences, make a visible menu with lighting and good font sizes. For singles and widows, can we have a bar that we could dine at versus sitting at a table by ourselves? And can you host some events for business interests and special interests and social groups? So this is a chart that basically shows that there was a lot of support for a self-sufficient casual dining experience here in Sun City West. Some people even said you could use some reserves, you could use some dues, but generally a tremendous interest in at least having something here that was self-sufficient. They would like the experience to be more on the casual side, have indoor-outdoor seating, views, offer drinks and coffee service, occasional live music. Examples that were referred to as favorable or comparable would be Anacapa, Trilogy's Restaurant, and Sun City Grand. This is showing the comparison of casual dining to a bar or tavern or fine dining, and you can see that the favorite is casual dining, but support generally around. So pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the country. I'm gonna have to talk a little faster. The sport obviously was introduced in 1967, but there's now 5 million players in the country. It's doubled since 2017 as a sport. There's 38,000 courts in the country, over 9,500 venues. There's 90 venues or more being built every month of pickleball. It costs about $30,000 to build a new court, and I think 4 courts fit into a tennis court. When we look at core play for pickleball, the 2 generations, silent and baby boomers, this is national data, make up 52% of the core play, so it's clearly an over 55 sport, and they make up 30% of overall players. Gen X makes up about 13% of core play, but again, it's rising everywhere. I did do a chart for you on looking at the number of courts in our competitive set. You have a lot of courts, but the dearth for everybody seems to be covered courts, shaded courts in our climate, and you don't really see them in our competitors, but that doesn't mean that it's not a great direction for us to consider. It certainly seemed 66% support covering the pickleball courts. Did I miss something? Oh, thank you. Thank you. So adding more courts and covering courts, there was definite support for that. You can see the stacked bar chart on the right, with the orange bar being the part, 30% saying, well, do it self-sufficiently, and then another 23% saying, oh, you could use reserves, and another 11% saying you could use some dues. So coming to a close here, Sun City West has a master plan. I would just recommend to you these mandatory considerations, no matter what you do and how you move forward, is that I think it's very important that you maintain the affordable value of this community. It's foundational to how this place was built. The equity and inclusion of 3 generations and their values should always be considered in anything that you're doing moving forward. Making sure you're in compliance with the Arizona Department of Water Resources and water management policy for so many reasons. Supporting resident engagement in governance and volunteerism. Anything you can do yourselves or your friends to get them engaged, showing up at meetings, volunteering, getting involved makes a big difference here. And then I would encourage you to monitor your resident, and not just your resident, but your employee satisfaction. One of the things I've said to Bill and I think to Sue in my discussion with them is this is a complicated process, master planning is, but it is a lot more challenging to refurbish the Mona Lisa than to paint it blank. And when I was with Del Webb and doing communities over the years with a developer that had a professional team and staff that did this every day for their living, we were working with blank slates, and that's hard. It's hard to do it in development. And now we're trying to do it at Sun City West, create an update without some of that same background. So understand this is a difficult process. Be patient with yourselves, be patient with one another, be patient with the professionals that are coming to the table, because this is an uncharted territory and you're touching something very precious. So I would just leave you with that caution. So that's a review of the 7 steps. I'm at 11:01. I'm sure people are going to be exiting on me here shortly. I've got 2 slides left. One is this is the master plan panel that I recommend you consider setting up to help guide and illuminate you through this process. My point about this is that these are not decision makers. My point is that you take torch-educated graduates that help your professionals be familiar with the community and have the institutional knowledge of Sun City West without further burdening your board or staff, and have a panel that's basically available to them through the master plan process. That this group would be selected to provide objective, non-political insight, maintain confidentiality when necessary with the professionals that they're meeting with, to help them get to concepts that would ultimately be brought to you, contribute diverse perspectives and experience. So the selection of that master plan panel, I think, is important. Recognizing that master plan panel does not, and not my intention in recommending this, to replace your resident engagement. There should still be resident engagement of all kinds, but the master plan panel is really there to support and illuminate the professionals that are going to be working with you that aren't here every day and don't have all the knowledge that you guys have. And I think that panel maybe should exist for 12 to 18 months, but that's a thought process. And then the second piece is this amenity-specific work groups, which I referenced earlier, where I think your residents, employees, and board should work side by side in some specific amenity workshops to help get focus on the amenities, to guide the professionals and give input and feedback to the professionals that will ultimately help in this kind of whole reallocation or update of the final piece. So that's the end. That's the end of my show. So thank you for your patience and your listening. And I'm 3 minutes over, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. That was very, very thorough, and I'm really appreciative of your ability to drill down the survey information and the information from, the data from studies across the country, and connecting that with all of the pieces to kind of pull it together. So do we have specific questions from the board? Tim?
Yeah, Michelle, do you know of any other large community like ours that has gone through the reinventing process like we're looking at?
I can't say that I have a precedent off the top of my head. I'm sure that there are older active adult communities, perhaps Florida, that you could look to that are large scale, but that Del Webb has done, other than your neighbor's Sun City, when they've maybe upgraded or done something, I don't think there's a lot of precedent for this. And
So
I
we
think
would basically be breaking new ground.
I think you're breaking new ground, and you have a unlike other Del Webb communities around the country, they're smaller, and that makes a big difference. We have a large population here, and so yeah.
Sharon?
Did you, Michelle, thank you very much. This is very helpful. Did you look at any of the AARP livable communities? Because I didn't see anything referenced in here. It was one of the questions that I'd asked of Epic Strategies a long time ago, because they have over 600 of them in the United States, and they're actually building one in Tempe right now. So that's one of the ones that's out there is in the process of being built, that we actually have local that we could go look at if you want.
Do you know the name of it?
I don't, but I can get it for you for
Okay,
sure.
yeah.
Because the person who's doing all the transit for it works for Northwest Valley Annex, is helping us with transportation.
Great.
So I can definitely get it for you.
Yeah.
It's just one of the areas that get information from all the time, and I know that it's important for people to just look it up. You can actually, they'll send you out their magazine all the time that tells you what's going on in livable communities. And it's one where the Gen Z and the Gen X are actually moving into because of the way they're being built. So I just
Right.
asked, did you have any?
I'm
was there any-
familiar with livable communities. Walkable communities is another term that's used inside the master planning domain. They're different they usually have very different location parameters than a Sun City West. You know, where we're located in an unincorporated area, not part of a municipality, you know, puts us in a different category. So to Tim's question, the precedent, we could learn things from livable communities and walkable communities and incorporate them, but they're not the same. They're not created and governed and existing locationally in the same way that we are.
So one follow-up question then. So basically, what you're saying is that the livable communities are more into a city. For example, Sun City Grand it has the City of Surprise. So when City of Surprise is building another, I want to say it's like 243 acres of walking space and buildings right now. They're in the drawing stages of it. On that 700 acres that they have in Surprise, that would be it's run by the city, so they have more control than we do here with the county.
It would make sense that might be the case.
Okay.
If you have a precedent of an unincorporated livable city, then that might be one to look at. But yeah, I think it makes a difference.
I'll try and get you the name of that as well, because I do have somebody that's on Northwest Valley Connect's board that is the Director of Advocacy for AARP. So he has contacts that you could see. I'll definitely look.
Great, thanks.
Okay, other questions? Roberta?
Well, first I have a statement. If the boomers were 1946 to 64, your stats are wrong because we're 76 this year.
Happy birthday.
And that includes a lot of us on this table. My other question is there a timeline for implementation? I haven't seen that. I mean, is this going to go on for years, or are we going to have a sort of a cutoff date when we know we can? Because a lot of things have been delayed over the years, like the tennis courts at Kuntz, because we keep being told, oh, we're waiting on the master plan. So is there a deadline?
That would be a next step for us to make a decision about. Other questions? Comments, questions from the audience? Come up to the microphone, please. Name and number.
Just being a little facetious, but a little humor in this situation. My name's Paul Burrier. My rec number is 113848. And I just thought some of the numbers were skewed when you got talking about the age limit of 41 to 56. Seems like a lot of people in here always hear you got to be 55 to get in here, or have somebody in your family 55. And a lot of trophy wives are in here, I think.
Trophy husband.
Well, I don't know what to say about that, but that's the group that's going to be here soon. Other questions? Anybody? Okay, we will take the information and connect with our general manager and determine the next steps that we're going to be taking. I do want to announce that we've had technical issues throughout Michelle's presentation. The internet crashed midway through her presentation, but then it came back up. So the AV folks will be putting up a recording on YouTube of most of her presentation via a backup recording that they have. Very unfortunate, but thanks for getting some kind of a solution. Yes. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is a reminder for committee members to take the online committee application that will be open until May 27th at 2 p.m. We did have two of our committees that did a trial in person in action at the end of their their last meeting to determine if that's a better way to get feedback from our committee members rather than doing the online survey. So that's in operation, and then we'll get the results of that and make a determination going forward. Okay, are there any general board director comments before we close? Anybody online? Sharon?
I just wanted to thank Director Stannenbein and Director Hurley for bringing the electric golf cart question that we had at our last board meeting up at the golf meeting, and looking at the infrastructure going forward of one of the golf courses, which is Deer Valley, and putting that into place. The other piece is that I believe the general manager stated he was trying to put together some people, anybody interested in looking at that could be a part of that group, wanted to, or to Mr. Stannenbein. So if there's anybody, you looked for volunteerism, there's a question if you're interested in what's looking at the infrastructure for the community, please feel free to give him a call. I think it's really important to understand that we originally asked about the golf carts in general, I'm not trying to remove the gas golf carts. I'm trying to see if there's a way to make sure that our infrastructure that's here is built, that we actually look at all the cart barns and how they have to be, what has to be changed for the golf group in regards to what has to be there, even to add electric golf carts into the situation. And as we're buying new ones to replace the old ones, that we at least take a look at that, because going forward, that is going to be something that's going to be in our community. So I think that it's important that we look forward to that piece. And I learned a lot from our general manager about not being able to plug in an amplifier, for example, in regards to the infrastructure at a golf course, because we don't have enough electricity. So to me, one of the committees that needs to be looked at in going forward with the master plan is that we actually have an infrastructure group that's looking at all those pieces, because it also includes Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and 5G and cell towers and all that. And it is important to our community that we look forward to doing those kinds of things. But I wanted to thank them for bringing it up. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Any comments from the audience? Come up and give your name, number. 2 minutes. Be very concise.
You're going to start right now, okay? My name is Linda Rush, and my number is 131584. And I'm speaking today about a medium-sized dog park. I'm advocating for this. I have been living here for 4 years, and when I first moved here, I couldn't understand why you had a big and a small, but no medium-sized dog park. The main size dog that is most popular in the United States is a medium-sized dog park. I started first by meeting with Roberta and having her look it over. That was 3 years ago. I have talked to Riley and Jack Stroud about this. I have sent in many, many emails, and I'm not speaking just for myself, but anybody who has a medium-sized dog. In the small dog park, if you take a medium-sized dog in there, it's nasty, and they're not happy with you. If you take your medium-sized dog to the big dog park, you get like I did. I got run in by a 150-pound dog and got a bone bruise. So I don't understand why it couldn't be something that could be done. And I'm not asking for a lot of money to be spent, possibly just a sign on one of the dog parks. But there are a lot of people that don't take their dog there because of that situation. So I would really, really like you to, as the property committee knows, I've spoken to them, I'd like you to take a good look at this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comment?
Again, my name is Peggy Hunter. My number is 65441. Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Schwing, I would like to request that the dog park issue be put on the agenda for a future board meeting. There's a lot of things besides the medium dog situation, the condition, people coming in from Portobello. I would really appreciate that if we could discuss this. Thank you.
Okay, and that might be referred back to properties, and your other issue probably goes back to the Gulf Committee prior to coming to the board, but that can be handled. Yes? Name and number?
Yes, Paul Burrier, 113848. And along the dog park, I know lots of people come here and they have problems, but no solutions. And I thought one little solution was up front with the small dog park, to make for a medium, you could, it's divided into two sections today. And you have a sign there that says, any dog 16 inches can come in. I was gonna say on the second entrance to the east side, you could put a sign that said, medium dogs, say 20 inches or under are welcome through this gate. Any dog up to 20. I mean, we're not trying to limit the little dogs, we're just letting the older, medium-sized dogs in there. And that's all I'll say about that. And then I'd also address another committee about our safety flags for the swimming pool and Coombs. And I didn't hear back anything. I know that Bill is probably, Carl Wilhelm was going to talk to Mr. Boston. I saw him adjusting the lights there, but he was here. Oh, there he is. Okay. But again, I did mention, I was led to believe that the swim team didn't swim there, so they didn't need the flags. Well, I know the swim team does swim there. I'm going to see a lady from the pool put a chair there on the side of the pool to tell her when to turn when she's doing the backstroke. So I think other people, and I talked to a lady one time, she says, that sounds like a good point. And she was going to take it to the swim team to talk about it, but maybe that's fallen through there. But I'd just like to mention again, for a safety measure, just to maybe put up some flags. Wouldn't be that expensive.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Bill, do you have any comments?
I do not.
Okay. And directors, we're all good? Okay, thank you very much for attending a very long meeting, but very valuable. I will adjourn the meeting.